Your path to a successful career starts here with us.
Our talent development programs have created opportunities across a variety of entertainment networks.
We are building a path of empowerment where you can see yourself and be yourself, and that's with NBCUniversal Launch.
NBCU Launch is a comprehensive approach to creating initiatives and programs that provide access and opportunity for those who haven't gotten in the conventional way, especially underrepresented communities, including those with disabilities.
Through this program, the biggest thing about it is they support you to be yourself. Action! That's the driving force of this program. I mean, it's a program for diverse voices. It's life-changing.
I started out in the NBC TV Writers program. A lot of us are at the executive producer level now, and I'm so thankful to them.
The next generation of content creators should absolutely choose NBCU Launch to catapult their career.
The time is now. You're ready. Take your career to new heights with NBCUniversal Launch.
So I'd like to introduce our moderator today, Michael Pagarian, who is the TV Programming DEI Manager at NBCU Launch.
Yes, hi, thank you, Maria, and it's really great to be here with you all. I've heard that sizzle so many times because I helped create it. So, and SJ was the closing soundbite there. If you'll hear shortly. But yes, my name is Michael Pagarian. I'm a manager on the NBCU Launch team, and I'm happy to facilitate today's conversation, Launch Talks, breaking into television directing. Before we get into the panel, just want to give you a little bit more information on NBCU Launch. So we're the umbrella brand that houses the comprehensive diversity, equity, inclusion initiative efforts across NBCUniversal's television portfolio. So that encompasses NBCU television and streaming, as well as the Universal Studio Group. Among our programs and initiatives are the landmark NBC TV Writers Program and the NBC TV Directors Program and Female Forward, and some recently announced programs this past year, including the Below the Line Traineeship and Unscripted Producers Initiative. For today's conversation, we'll be hearing from some really great alumni of the TV Directors Program and Female Forward, and sort of discuss how they broke into television directing and their creative journeys. So without further ado, I'll introduce our panelists. First, we have Sarai Guidetti. Sarai's work spans across films, documentaries, TV, web series, branded content. She directed her first episode of television on NBC's The Blacklist this year. She's also been an associate producer on CW's Supergirl, as well as HBO Max's pilot Dead Boy Detectives and the feature film Home Delivery. Hi, Sarai.
Hello.
Next we have Cantu Lentz. Cantu is a writer-director based in Los Angeles. She got her first episode on Chicago Fire, the Dick Wolf show on NBC. She most recently directed Jerry Bruckheimer's Fire Country on CBS. Also, her award-winning short film, Jack and Joe Don't Want to Die, starring Justin Kirk, premiered at Tribeca Film Festival and is currently being developed into a feature film. So congrats. Welcome, Cantu.
Thank you so much for having me.
And last but not least, we have Esther Munoz, who is an award-winning drama director. She got her start on Chicago PD, another Dick Wolf show on NBC, and since then has directed on Chicago Med, The Cleaning Lady on Fox, Manifest on Netflix, American Horror Stories, and most recently Fear the Walking Dead on AMC. Another really great fact about SJ is that she is the two-term co-chair of the Latino Committee for the DGA. Just amazing stuff. So welcome, SJ.
Thank you. Happy Latinx Heritage Month.
Yes. I just want to get right into the conversation. You know, we have limited time, but I think you all have such amazing stories and some great advice and wisdom to give to this audience about breaking into television directing. So I want to start from the beginning. How did you get your start in directing, and sort of what inspired you to pursue TV directing, and specifically the Female Forward program? So we can start with SJ. Your face is up on my screen right now.
Yeah, I began, I was a dancer at a young age. I always thought that that's where I would end up as a choreographer. When I was in high school, I always loved movies. I was obsessed with movies, and my father actually, non-Latino side, I need to point out. He thought, no, dance, not a long-term career, and he pushed me towards film and television. I ended up going to UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television, and of course, as a Latina, I was really unique, I think, in the bunch. I remember my interview with Jose Luis Valenzuela. He's incredible, and I found my start there. But I always knew that film and cinema was somehow in the mix, so I was working on the side with different companies. I tell this story because it's important to remind our listeners to go for what you want. But I wrote a letter in high school to Steven Spielberg, and I said, I'm obsessed with your films. If you ever start a studio, please contact me. It was literally like a year and a half, 2 years later, I was in my first year of college, and I got a phone call. And it was Human Resources of DreamWorks saying, we started a studio. We have a letter here you wrote to Steven. Would you like to come in? And from there, and that's why I say, don't ever hesitate. Reach out to, those you admire and go for what you want. From there, I ended up going to grad school. TV directing, it took me a while to find it. I just didn't know. Like, I had the craft and I was ready to go, but it wasn't until I was in LA and organizations just like the New York Latino Film Festival, exactly that, introduced me and said, look, you want to be a filmmaker. It's not, being Scorsese necessarily. There's a way to work and make a living. Here is television directing. So that's how that brought me NBCU, and I'm sitting here today with you all.
Yeah. Sarai, how about you? I know you have like a little bit of a different sort of origin story when it comes to directing. So can you tell us about that?
Well, first of all, man, SJ, that's an incredible story. Yeah, I think you win there. Gosh, my journey has been long, but strategic and purposeful. For me, I actually started in television. I worked in television for many years, working on the studio side, then on the show level in production and post-production. And I think for me, I treated my career as a marathon because I'm the kind of person that likes to know everything and how everything works, be completely well-rounded. And I knew that I always wanted to direct, but I took the producing route first, because I think that just gave me kind of big picture, right? So I think that everything that I've gone through, from the production and the post-in has prepared me to step up to the plate as a director. And I think that because of that background, when I walked on the show that I directed, it was I was ready and I was confident, and you don't just get that, having a sprint to the finish line or sprint to the start of your directing career. It's a long journey, and the beauty of TV for me is that you get to you have the opportunity to witness and participate in the creative television process repeatedly in such a short time, right? So I can even tell you how many episodes I've worked on just in many different capacities, but that repetition and that practice and that understanding, I think also prepared me, and I think also why I love TV is that you get to participate in the in this constant evolving narrative, and you get to be a part of a beloved show and characters that may have been on air for many years, and just being a part of that is wonderful to me. So I think that in film festivals you tend to maybe want to just go and film, but you get the most practice and the most growth if you're going into television.
Yeah, no, I love what you said too about it and not being it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. That's something that the leader of NBCU Launch, Jeannie Mao, she says all the time. It's all about the long game, and how you get there it's very different for everybody. So Cantu, what about you?
I think for me, two routes sort of got me here, which is I also started as a performer, also as a dancer. I danced in a children's television show, worked in a circus as a child. I grew up in Peru. And all of that led me initially to go to New York to study theater. I did a conservatory, I did it all. I sort of felt like performance wasn't enough for me, in terms of I wanted to tell stories that I felt were interesting versus being casted in something. So I started writing little black box theater, sort of like mini plays. My ideas, my personal writer director ideas have a lot of metaphorical things, which unless you have like Lion King Broadway money, you can't really make work. Like I'm not. So that sort of led me to film to come to LA. And slowly in that way, I sort of started to develop. I wanted to be able to get my feelings out in a way that felt like I could touch them. And I think film is one of those ways that you can do that. And so that's sort of how I started in film. I started making short films, branded content. I just took any job that would allow me to be a director on set. I also think growing up, my grandmother was a very famous portrait photographer in Lima, and my mother is a photojournalist, which I think is kind of interesting in how that evolved in terms of my grandmother has portrayed people how they would like to be remembered. My mother has portrayed people in a sort of very raw truth, and I feel like I like to tell a bunch of little lies in order to find a larger truth, which I think is kind of neat. And then TV directing, I think I see it, I see any type of art form as a sport, in terms of you have to do it every day in order to actually get better. Like there's this illusion, or at least for me, this idea that, oh, like inspiration will hit you and like it'll be this genius thing and only then, but genius can only hit, or the inspiration can only hit if you have some type of discipline. And I wanted to find a job and a career in which I could do narrative directing like 250 days out of the year. The only sort of job that allows you to do that is television directing, in terms of, and also you get to do all different types of storytelling, right? I'm a writer director, but I don't want to live in my brain all the time. I want to be able to go outside of that and tell different types of stories and live in different types of worlds. And the other magic of television that I find just as a viewer is that, as I also love movies and the grandiosity of going to a movie theater and having everything be larger than life, but there's something very magical and special about a television is in your house. It's your friend. It's on when you're alone. It's on with your family. It's on through a breakup. It's on through good times, bad times. And that access of storytelling and being able to tell stories that are so intimate with people, I think has great power. And I'm really happy to get to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, I love everything you said. It's cool to see also how to see the generations of storytellers that you come from and the different mediums that your mother and your grandmother chose. Since you all are alumni of our TV Directors Program Female Forward, I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about how that was your start and what the program entails and what your experience was in the program. So Sarai, I'm actually going to turn to you. One component of the program is going through these workshops or master classes before you shadow and you direct your episode. Can you talk a little bit about that? Who was instructing them? What was what did you learn in those workshops?
In the workshops, yeah. Well, I think that you guys did such a beautiful job in having it layered, right? Having you go through this and you go through that to be fully prepared. The workshops were led by two top directors in the biz, Bethany Rooney and Mary Lou Bala, who literally wrote the manual on how to direct TV. So their mentorship was really great to have before leading up to it, because, especially for people that don't come from TV, they're telling you exactly what you're going to be walking into and how to prepare for it. So I think that is extremely valuable, even before you get to shadow, because again, sometimes you may not have been on a set and don't know the proper etiquette, and they prepare you for that. So the workshops that I participated in our program in our year, were every weekend, and we did go through the book, through their book, and prepped an episode as we were about to direct, and I think that foundation was great, because then when you get into shadowing, you're now pretty much putting it on its feet, and observing another director. But the best way to approach it, and what Mary Lou and Bethany always encourage, and you should be doing this, is pretend that you're actually directing that episode. Go through every step. How are you going to block it? And that's great to know when you're on set and you're watching how that director put it together, and you're comparing your shots, and you're like, oh man, like I had way too many setups, right? So I think my biggest takeaway, because I went on a show that shoots in 7 days, which is, for me, I was like, holy crap, like how is this possible? So it was a masterclass in efficient directing when I got into the shadowing part. And I don't think that I would have felt secure, or like, I had no fear going in if I hadn't gone through that process. So yeah.
I'm gonna ask you a follow-up question. And it's a really basic one, because I don't know how much the audience knows about sort of the process of TV directing, but I know for myself, when I came into the television side, I'm like, wait, what is shadowing? So can you just tell everyone, like, what is shadowing? And then talk about a little bit. And what I loved about your experience specifically is that so part of the program is the directors get to shadow 2 different directors on 2 different episodes before they direct. So Sarai got to shadow someone who's her mentor, and then also someone who is an alumni of the program. So can you first tell everyone what shadowing is, and then talk about that experience of working with 2 different directors?
Yeah, well, shadowing is the most important thing that you can do. I think it's crucial that before you ever direct, that you go through that process, especially because directors, we don't get to watch each other work. So if you have the opportunity, take it. For me, well, shadowing. So shadowing is pretty much you're observing an experienced director going through every stage of the process of prep. So you're part of the casting, observing the casting, the prep meetings, content meetings, all the department meetings that you go through, and watching how they're making each decision, and how they're dealing with challenges that are coming their way. Because in TV, oftentimes you're also dealing with budget issues where you're like, oh wait, I also have to deal with that. So that's also a thing that you have to consider. And having a producing background, that's something that I'm always strategizing, like how can I make this easier for the show? And I think that you learn that by observing as well. And then when you go on set, you're watching how you're observing how they're working with the cast, working with crew. And the important thing, I think, is also asking questions to the director of, what's your process? What are you thinking? And oftentimes, like John Terlesky is, the director that I shadowed, and happens to be a mentor of mine. I'm like, whenever he walked up to an actor, I'm like, would you tell him? Because I just wanted to be in their head. And I got very lucky that I had that open relationship with John, that he told me exactly what he was thinking. He told me, exactly what he told the actor. So I learned so much from that. And then also you're seeing, you go through the whole production process. The shadowing also allows you to network and get to know everyone, and obviously don't interfere with the work, but make some friends. Because I think what helped me, and everyone that I feel goes through this program, when you're shadowing twice on the show that you're about to direct, is that you're no longer that new kid coming in as a director, which is often the case for directors in TV, right? So when I came on set, it was like, oh, my family, friends, like, let's do this. And they were all rooting for you. So that's the beauty of shadowing. And Mahesh, like, I think the 2 things that I learned was how to be an efficient director, and how to find your Zen. Mahesh Paylor, he's just like the most Zen, calm guy. And it was nice to see someone at the beginning. He's done a lot of episodes, so not quite the beginning, but earlier stages of a career, versus John having directed over 100 episodes. And there's such a difference, right? So you can take from this and from that to build yourself in whatever way or whatever approach you want. take.
I love that. And for the audience too, Mahesh was actually featured in our sizzle that you saw. So he was that director sort of after that opening remarks. But SJ, Kantu, is there anything that you would like to add to sort of the shadowing process?
Okay, I'll go.
Yeah.
I think something that is really valuable, or that was really valuable to me, was because you are the new kid, is sort of like, because you won't always get to sort of like shadow, but maybe you can go one day or two before to just observe. And it's that you are sort of watching this as a battlefield and going, okay, well, how does this function, right? Like, who likes to go first? How does this person like to function? Because you're going to have to insert yourself in a way that you have to make the whole machine work, but you are both the only person that is different to the whole, right? So I find shadowing really, really, really helpful in terms of understanding the machine, so that I understand what piece I need to be in it in order to be successful in it, if that makes any sense.
Oh no, it makes total sense. I actually want to, I'm gonna sort of, we're gonna move forward slightly. So it's like you've shadowed, now it's your turn to direct. And Kanto, I'd really love to hear from you about this because of your experience sort of doing shorts, working in the indie world, and then coming to episodic. What is the role of a director on a TV set? How is that different than being on your own short film set, your own indie feature set?
For sure. I mean, I think my own, yeah. I think when you're making your own stuff, especially if it's written by you, your fingerprint is everywhere, right? So like you've touched everything. Differently for even like, because I've done a lot of commercials, as well as different because it's not narrative, but it has a similar aspect in terms of television, in which you are having to fall in love with something that you did not create, right? You're having to find yourself in this thing. Like, where am I? Because you can't just mimic the show, right? Like, you can't be like, okay, this is what it looks like, let's just do that. For me, I need to be instinctual. So for me, what I did was I watched, I had the time, thankfully, because it was still the pandemic. So I watched all of Chicago Fire, and I studied it in a way so that when I was on set, I could respond from instinct. So I knew I watched it for tone, meaning like, how are the performances? How big or small do they like to go? So I like to watch it and absorb it and understand where I find myself in it, so that then I can make it my own. Because I do think that that's really interesting. Trying to figure out, how do you fall in love with this thing that someone else made, and how can you also bring the things that your strengths that will complement it.
Yeah. SJ, thinking about the sort of the trajectory or journey of an episode of television. Can you walk us through sort of like what the prep process, I mean, since you've been on so many shows, like what is the prep process? Is it the same for every show? Does it differ? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for those listening to understand that directing television is entirely different than anything you'd be used to directing a film. For those of you who've done short films or features, just as Kantu's saying, it's entirely different. What we come in, we're called guest directors. So we have producing directors, that's usually an executive, and a director, meaning a producer director. They will stay on for the duration of the show and help to work with the directors, ensure that the tone of the show is remaining the same. Now, not every show, like Michael was saying, has a producing director. So, you'll come on a show sometimes where there is not that person to work with. And some shows have a director of photography assigned to you, so you're working with him in prep. A bunch of other shows, you don't even meet the director of photography or your cinematographer until you're on the first day of production, what we like to call principal photography. So you come in as a guest director. I do 1 hour drama. So I come in, I have usually, 7-8 days, you do a prep. So that all that time is, and it can vary depending on the show. Maybe it's last 5 days. You have all meetings scheduled. And these are meetings with your department heads. When we say department heads, that means the person who's in charge, the production designer who oversees all of the art, say the sets we build, etc. Costume designer, they work with the person dressing people. So you work with all these department heads, which will then be in charge of the DP. He's the one that tells his key grip what equipment to bring and his gaffer how you're going to light it. So you have all these meetings, the goal being that you've talked about every detail of that episode that needs to be prepared and produced by these people before you get to set. And again, it's just meetings, meetings, meetings. And then late at night, you will have that time to say, okay, how am I shooting this? And that's when you're going to do your homework. Ideally, then the day you first step on set, we call production. So pre-production was when you were prepping. Productions when you first step on set and the cameras are rolling. You have hopefully talked to everybody. Now, some shows, much like broadcast versus streaming, you have not talked to your DP. You might not even have met him or her. But you then will pick up this relationship because you know what you're doing and you're prepared and you can set up a shot. And then in post-production, so you'll shoot, say I shoot 8 days, 9 days, maybe up to 11, depending on the show. And then you will then be in post-production. Post-production is we standardly on a 1-hour drama get 4 days of post-production. That means we work with an editor. And that's usually because of the way things are these days online. So you'll be in the room with them and you'll be working on your edit. And so that's kind of like the general idea. And again, as Michael says, every single show is different. So what is fantastic, if you're that kind of person who loves, shaping yourself and new riddles and constantly changing and being able to adapt, being a diplomat, like TV is for you, because every single show is different and you don't really get tipped off beforehand. So you just have to adapt in the moment, read the room, and figure out how the machine works.
Ooh, yes. Well, thank you for so beautifully and eloquently laying out sort of each phase of making an episode of TV. But you just said something that really lit a spark in my brain about reading the room. I think that's so important in this business period, but especially as a guest director. So can you talk a little bit more about sort of that? And then to that effect, like when you are in these rooms, how do you navigate that? How do you read the room? Who are you deferring to as the guest director?
Yeah, as a guest director, again, we're a guest. There's a what this metaphor, I'm sure I'll ruin it, but that you bring directing television is much like Thanksgiving. You bring your dish and everyone else will have brought their dishes. Hopefully your dish goes with everyone else's dish. But you can't dictate if everyone will like your dish either. So not everyone in the room will like your dish. Meaning you have to go in, be kind, be grateful. I think gratitude and graciousness. You, especially directing your first episode, it's important to remember that everyone in the room with you has probably been on that show for a minimum of 1 season, potentially 8 seasons. So they know everything way better than you ever could. And that you listening and taking advice is the best medicine. I also say that the adaptability required for our job is you have to be strong and be able to make decisions, but you have to be gracious enough to know when someone else has a better idea. Because I don't think anybody wants a director on set who can get walked all over and doesn't have an opinion, because we have to hold a vision. We have to make sure we make our day. And at the end of the day, when there's a bunch of voices that are arguing, you might have to be the person to put your foot down and make the decision so we can move forward. But like you said, Michael, every show is so different. Every show you'll feel it from the head. I've been on shows where perhaps, number one is not always so happy, or the showrunner is not so present, and it trickles down, the crew can feel it. So you have to adapt and deal with challenges in those ways, much like walking into a different family and making sure that everyone can get along and finish their Thanksgiving dinner without a brawl, right?
Yes. I love that analogy. Clearly, everyone likes whatever dish you're bringing to the table because you've worked on so many different shows. I just want to also clarify something for the audience too, because you mentioned it. I think Kantu also brought it up about like number one, number two. So when they say that, they're saying like number one on the call sheet. So, you know, if it's I'm trying to think if it's Law and Order SVU, it's Mariska Hargitay. You know, she's also executive producer. So knowing that, Kantu, I'm really curious to hear from you because you have such a great background in performance and acting. How do you what is it like working with actors on the set? You know, especially when you're dealing with someone who might be an executive producer and has their own sort of stake in the show as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's looking at each actor as an individual artist, right? Because there's not like one way of directing everybody. So the performance background does help. I always try to find out sort of if they are younger performers, I can sometimes ask like, what is the sort of schooling you've had? And like, is it Esper? Is it Strasberg? Is it like, just so that you know, like, oh, maybe they like repetition. Maybe like they like straightforward, like a lot of people are like never say faster, slower, but some actors really do prefer it because they just like know, and they just don't want you to go into like their whole backstory of like, remember this, like, just tell me, what do you want? And that's also important to know, like, what is the type of direction that this actor likes? And sometimes, you know, sometimes I've been warned like, oh, this actor will be very difficult. They'll ask a lot of questions, which I've always found very strange because I'm like, well, they should be asking questions. You know, they're embodying a story. So if they have questions, all of those questions are valid. I think it's always, for me, I never ask an actor to do something that I wouldn't be able to do. So if I don't understand it, I would not be able to direct it. Obviously, I mean, we all know that. But I think that idea of really just showing, honestly, it's just showing respect and being like, doing your homework, understanding the story, and listening if there's doubts or questions and being able to guide them through that, because you're really protecting them. It's a very vulnerable thing to be a performer. You're being asked to be like, just go do this. It's like, okay, well, but you could just use that. You could use a take that I don't like, that I'm not comfortable with, right? So you're just always protecting them and making sure that they also know that you know your stuff, so that if anything, any guidance you give them, they are safe with you. So that's what I like to do.
Yeah, SJ, you mentioned too, you know, there's a high likelihood that the actors have lived with these characters for a whole season, and in a lot of cases, multiple seasons. How do you navigate that when you're working with an actor who, you know, knows his character honestly better than you do?
Yeah, well, you know, usually it's right there in the script. We often call the script our Bible. Like, okay, well, let's go back to our Bible. It's usually right there on the page. So it doesn't need to become so complicated. I think it's also understanding when you go direct a film, like probably in our audience, a lot of people are directing short films. They're thinking so specifically of each moment. And I think that that's the freedom of television directing, that when you're working with an actor, and again, it's different for, you know, the first season of a show, when you're more become a creator in a way when you're directing those. But when you're on a show that's been established, like, to have a general idea, you know, where I felt like the action would take them from obviously this room, and it would take them towards the bathroom because they're talking about going, it's in the script, they're talking about going to get something in the restroom. So, you know, it's that simple of bringing them in. But sometimes when you'll learn, like Kantu's saying, how each actor works, those specificities within the moments, sometimes you can just let them go. You say, give them a direct, this is your starting point, this is your ending point, let's try it. And let them walk through it, through the blocking. And sometimes they'll find, no, we got to stop here. This line would make me stop, you know? And then if for some reason you totally disagree on that moment where the tone changes of the scene, you can go into that. But, you know, you pick your moments and your choices wisely, because generally, if you're that far into a show, they know the world, they know the script in and out more than you ever could.
I see Sarai smiling, and I really want to hear from Sarai because it's like, you directed on The Blacklist on the 10th season. executive producer, star, legend, James Spader. How did you approach that as a first-time director going on to this, this hit TV series on NBC?
Wow, the shadowing really gave me an insight to each actor on how they approach, how they even walk on set. What are they thinking? I hate to talk specifically about James, but like he is quite brilliant. There's a reason why he's not just an executive producer on paper. Like he actually is creatively part of every process. He was on every email during prep. So there's a sense of also collaboration with him, and for him and for many of them, it's just being prepared. I saw the way that he worked. Everything had to make sense. There had to be logic, and I'm the same way in how I approached everything. I'm like, I need to know why this is here, and that's exactly how it. So it was very easy to get on that level, because that's how I usually approach things. And really, like, you have on any show that you go on, and you're dealing with a long running series, and someone says, oh, number one, it might be difficult. Like, sure, like you want to get insight from other people on how they work with them, but you also have to throw it away and not let those judgments affect you, or even how you approach it, because James is actually a lovely person, and he's, like I said, really smart, and it was a back and forth of collaboration with him. And we would have fun ideas and just like go off of each other, right? So it's like, oh, what about if we do it this way? I'm like, oh yeah, and it would be funny if we do that, right? So I think that just as a director, you get to play, it's a lot of fun. So just being loose with it, and not holding any fear, not letting anybody cloud that judgment, because you're going to have your own relationship with that person.
Yeah, I don't know if there are any performers or theater people in the room, but just hearing that yes and, like, that improv sort of technique, I love it. It works. Before I move on, I do want to hear sort of from each of you, like, sort of quickly, like one do and one don't when directing your first episode. So SJ, you're off mute, so if you want to take it away.
Definitely do lean on the others. As I mentioned before, do. And don't worry about things. Look forward. And I think that's, just to expand on it slightly, what that means is you're going to be so nervous. There is such intense pressure to be a director, and especially for the first time, the amount of money these episodes and these shows, and you're at the helm. You can't have that all on your head. You really just have to look forward. And if you stumble, which you will, you just pick yourself up, don't look back, and keep moving forward, because that confidence and that ability to just refocus and move forward is super important, not only in your first episode, but in your career.
What are your thoughts, Katu?
I would say prepare as much as you can, because you have so little time, but try to just do it as much as possible, so that you can, when things will change, because they inevitably will change, you will prepare everything, and then something will go wrong and it'll have a domino effect on everything. But prepare so much that you'll be able to adjust to that, because you'll know it so well that you'll know what you need, right? What I mean by that is, if you lose an actor due to COVID, let's just say that, but you understand the scene so well that you know exactly how to, shoot it with a double, but you know exactly what you need, so that you're not losing time and getting all flustered about it. So just prepare as much as you can, so that you can readjust. And I think maybe, and this might be counterintuitive, I think maybe don't view yourself as a beginner. Yes, it is your first episode of television, but you are a director, and you are there for a reason. And it is your job to be the leader of the set. So at home, you can be afraid, and you can call your friends or your mother, whoever is your support system, and be like, I'm terrified. But do not allow that feeling or that energy to enter your set, because you are the responsible person of that set.
I'm gonna echo, because I think that you have to keep that in your mind. Do prepare, do your homework, know everything about the story, about the character. You're gonna go through a tone meeting during prep with the writer. Ask every question. If something doesn't make sense, like, know it, live it, be the story, be the character. So, like Hantu said, it's like you can pivot, and you can adapt. The don't would be, don't stress, don't rush. There will be times that maybe you fall behind because of something that was totally out of your control. And I think that immediately it's like that stress and that rush, and everyone around you like saying, okay, we got to move on. It's like, find your zen, go back to that, finding your zen, because the chaos is actually going to make time go slower. But if you focus and you're not stressful and you're not rushing, then you know how to approach a situation, and you're going to catch up. So and that was a big lesson that I also learned on my first episode, is like, chaos, zen, always zen.
Yeah, no, I want to sort of, I love that. Yes, let's all be zen. Something that I want to expand on too, that Kantu mentioned is, going off of what she said about, just believing in yourself, even though it is maybe your first time directing episodic TV and you're new to being that role in a TV set. I think we all, and I work with a lot of writers, first time in a writer's room, emerging directors, and I think everyone at certain times has a feeling of like the imposter syndrome. But I think you all, if you're on a TV set as a director, if you're in a writer's room as a staff writer, that means you were selected, right? You were selected by the showrunner and the creative execs who believe in you and your vision and everything that you bring to the table. So I just want to echo what Cantu says, and that's a part of this program too, is that like Sarai, Cantu, Ashley, they were all chosen by the showrunners and producing directors like any other director on the slate. So if anyone in the audience is looking to apply to the program, that's part of the process too, is that you are selected by the show. They believe in you.
And can I add on to that? Because
yeah.
it's not only your team, like you and Robert, it's the shows that are participating, they're in it because they also want to see you succeed. And I think the best way, like I'm so lucky that I got I went through this program instead of just going straight to directing, because everyone is cheering you on. Everyone feels like family. Everyone's rooting for you and setting you up for success. They know it's your first time, but they also are treating you as like, I believe in you, and I got you. And I felt that from the studio side, from the show level, the producer, the DP, the AD, like it's incredible. So, and yeah, apply. And if you don't get in, keep applying until you get in, even if it's the 10th time.
No, yes, please do. And we'll have more information too at the end about sort of where you can go to find more information and potentially apply. I think the last part of this conversation really is about sort of after you've done your first episode and you've had success there, how do you keep that momentum going? How do you get that next episode? So I'd love to hear from actually Kantu, because you did it most recently. You started on Chicago Fire, got a second episode of Chicago Fire, and then went to Fire Country. So what was sort of, how did you navigate that? What was your process there?
I mean, ideally you do a good job, hopefully, in the first one. And because I do think I was really honored to get called back, because that means, that gives you sort of a stamp of approval of, you did a good job, we want you back. This is, a somewhat of an ongoing relationship creatively. I think then it's also about being strategic. Ideally, if you're not working right away, stay busy, start writing, start making a film, so that people know that you're consistently creating. And then, as you do interviews, again, it's do your homework. If you're doing an interview for a show, know the show, understand the references of the show, understand why you would be good for the show, understand why your previous experiences could bring something to the show. It's all prep, right? I think, I mean, I did another firefighter show, which made sense in terms of, right, you're that feels right for everybody involved. But then also do your homework and how is that different, right? I just do think it's about doing your homework, staying active, not waiting for somebody to give you an opportunity right away. Because I think it is, at least when you're starting out, sometimes people, get right away. And then sometimes, well, also the pandemic, like it depends on when you're starting out. If it's a show that doesn't come back, then you're sort of like left with like, okay, there's no like second episode on this show. So I would say just stay busy, do your homework for any and all opportunities that are given to you so that you can, leave people with a 150% impression of yourself.
SJ, what are your thoughts on this subject?
I think it's probably foreign to a lot of people who do short films, at least those that I've spoken to, because they're like, what is this even? Well, TV in itself. When just to cut to that real quick, when people are like, even watching this panel, we're giving a little interview, and giving them some intel. It's like still trying to understand what TV directing is, and that's why I say read the books. Watch those extended versions on the television programs when you're downloading and watching all the shows. Get to know what it is and you can understand it more, because once you're working, to go back to your question, which is once you're working, how do you make this a career? Of course you have to do a good job, but that's good, right? In any career, we always have to do our best, and especially as Latinos, guys, I hate to break it to all of us, but we have to shine even brighter, because there's so few of us. But after that, it's not just the show, it's also executives. So executives, much like Michael's world, executives are the ones that have been doing notes with the studios, doing notes on these shows for years. And they've been working, giving notes on post. They know these shows. And as you become a developed filmmaker, you're going to start to understand what is your style, what is your brand. And of course, I'm not saying directors can't do comedy and drama. Surely they can, but you're going to find themes arise, like Kantu was saying earlier, of things you're drawn to. What is that message that's similar in all your work? As executives start to know you, and they'll understand what type of projects you're best at. They're really the ones too that can help identify what shows you would be great for. How you work. All the shows work differently. When they've seen you work on one show, they can go, okay, well, she'd be great over here. They'll love her. And so executives, it's super important to stay in touch with them. You always hear about these like agents and managers in Hollywood. I know it sounds like a joke, but they actually become very crucial people. And think of it as like a mom and a dad. They're people who support you and say, okay, SJ, so you want to be doing this type of work. Let's maybe contact this show, because this could be perfect for you. It's really just as you pick what your next short film is going to be, it's the same. It's like, what is your next TV show that you want to work on? So I hope that helps. And again, these are friendships. So as much as some of us are introverts, you have to do your best, maintain relationships, right? And like these are your family, no matter what their role is. If it be an executive, a writer, a showrunner, a fellow director, like, we're all in this world together, for the majority of our days on this planet. So it's best to form friendships. It makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah, no, it's so important. We could do a whole separate panel just on like the art of taking a general or a pitch meeting. Because it's a skill and it requires practice. And there is a method to building your sort of your brand, your self pitch, or being able to pitch yourself, right? And know like what you're bringing to the table uniquely. So one question that I do have for you, SJ, following that is, since you have sort of worked across all these different TV shows, how do you avoid being pigeonholed by like a specific genre or a specific type of story? Like how have you navigated that in sort of trying to get something that, maybe people aren't naturally considering you for.
Yeah, and that's a good note too, Michael, because if you look at my work, like my short films were all in Spanish or Spanglish. And so to be honest, and you know this, when everyone's like, you got to get into TV directing, you get to direct constantly, you'll love it, you'll be so productive. I was like, I don't think NBCU is going to want me. Like, just that was, and that's why I say everyone in the room apply, because you may look at your work and think, oh, it's so esoteric. There is no way that they would want the woman who directs Westerns. But, you know, there's also just an ability to execute that can go across all genres. And I think that kind of touches on what you're saying. Like, if there's a show that you really want, you can reach out to those relationships you've established and say, look, I know I like Contu was saying, I know I did my 2 firefighter shows and they're going to want to put me on a firefighter show. But look, guys, look at my personal work. I want to send you this sample, and I need to do this family drama. You know what I mean? And I even had a little family drama in my last, you know, you can see bits of it in those firefighter shows where I really leaned into those scenes. So you have to be an advocate for yourself. Just because you got 1 episode or even 2, you can't sit back and let people do the work for you. You're always going to be advocating for yourself, just as you will on your application, everyone. You're going to advocate for yourself and say why you belong in this program, and you're going to keep doing it probably until the end of time.
I love that. I also tell all the directors, especially the directors who have come through the Wolf shows, if you have directed on a Wolf show, you are prepared for anything. Like, you are ready. You've been put through the gauntlet. You've been through the battles, and you can direct pretty much anything. I know that I want to leave some time for Q&A. So one thing that I just want to mention in terms of books to read, and Sarai brought up the workshops. The 2 women who run them, Mary Lou Belli and Bethany Rooney, their book, which is the curriculum we go off of, their book is Directors Tell the Story by Mary Lou Belli and Bethany Rooney. Definitely check it out. But with that, I want to open it up to Q&A. So Maria, if there's any audience questions.
Does anyone have any questions in the audience that we would like to ask our wonderful panelists? Yes.
Hello. No, actually, just this last question. If you could all mention some other books or resources. I know lately I've been listening to some podcasts that are very helpful to me, and yeah, just wondering all of you what you guys are reading or have read and recommend.
I think what I would advise is joining every organization. And if you don't have the funds to do it, you can reach out to the people that run them. I say NALIP, the National Association of Latino Independent Producers, you know, Film Independent, any of these programs that are helping develop you into what Michael and his team want to see on your application is they have classes. They have classes about directing, talking to actors. And there's plenty in, I know AFP is now no longer, I believe, in New York, but there's other organizations in your city, and even online resources. As much as you can learn by going to workshops, that is what I would recommend. I'm sure Sarai and Kantu probably have more.
I mean, I actually agree with you, because I do think, I think the Mary Lou Belli book is fantastic. I think it's so clear. It covers everything. But I think directing is such a communal job that I think even that book is great if you read it, but it is the most useful when you are in a room with other directors and other writers and are sharing. So I would say, as much as possible, try to get into any type of workshop, not get into, but like get into a space in which you're with other people discussing a scene, discussing a movie, even in a movie club, like watching movies, watching television, dissecting it, watching some of the best episodes of television, watching television that you would be interested in directing. So if there's a show right now, that show had inspiration in other shows before, right? How did that show get to be that show? So for me, I am very self-taught. So it has come from watching a lot of stuff and asking myself a lot of questions and discussing it with other people. So I'm sort of on the SJ boat here as well.
Yeah, one thing that I want to just mention too about Mary Lou Belli and Bethany Rue's book is that it's a good foundation, right? And to what Kantu is saying, it's like it's best when applied with actors so you can practice their method. But I think what's important is that you make it your own too. When you're doing these workshops or working with actors or your other friends who are directors, is finding how can you make it your own. So when you go to a set and you're on hopefully a TV set, you are doing it your way too. So it's comfortable and easy for you.
And actually, oh sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually wanted to add something, which I think it's like, for me, it's like, I'm sure that everyone here is making films and making stuff, but I guess almost piggybacking off of what you're saying, Michael, is like, I do think that the most important thing is, unless someone's hiring you, is you need to be making things, whatever that is, you have to be making things. And the other part of this, which is the community, is like, you have to find the group of people that you trust within your artistic community, of like, who is the person that you're going to reach out and say, and that is, they need to have two things. One, they need to understand your work. They need to understand you as an artist. And two, they need to be really good at giving notes, because a lot of people give notes based off of what they would like to see, not based off what you are trying to do. So I think it's really important to find that community, because for me, that has been the way that I have grown.
Love that. Sarai, is there anything you want to add? Oh, is she frozen?
Sarai?
It looks like she's frozen.
I did think of one as we get Sarai back on here, is Peter Markham also is for when you're preparing for like an application for this and really getting to know the ins and outs of film. And he just does almost just the essential, which is breaking down the imagery, which is like what Kantu is saying, and really how to tell a story through images, because that is our essential job, is how do we tell a story and what goes on the screen. So, sure, it's great to like work on your behalf and, always think about your next job. But I think, like Kantu's saying, sometimes the essential job of directing is overlooked. We can't skip that. We have to work on our craft and be the best storytellers. Otherwise, there's no point in booking a job, because you won't be the best one at it, right?
Yeah, it looks like Sarai is joining back up, but is there any other questions from the audience?
I think, we have a couple more questions. So I just want to make sure, I know we're running close to our hour mark. Do we have time for maybe one last question, Michael? Okay.
Yeah.
I did see you had a hand earlier. Okay. You with the glass, if that's okay. Hi, my name is Lenny Sanchez, writer director. I did have a question, because I know someone mentioned that there is a lot of pressure, and obviously directing is not easy and it takes a toll on you mentally. And so I think one of the things that I'm trying to learn is, how do I self-care? How do I step back when things get too intense and I come back to myself so that I can do the job productively? And support everyone in the way that they need to be supported, including myself. So I am curious to know, what are your go-tos for self-care, and how do you help yourself through those situations?
Fantastic question. It's so true, because it's a very demanding job. But I think over time you learn what you need. Like when you first start out, you're going to do all the preparation that, even the book, right? Kantu, like the book has so much preparation. And the first few episodes, you might try doing it all. And then you realize, I can't possibly do this unless I don't, I won't sleep but 2 hours a night. So you start to learn yourself and what you need as a director to prepare. I think you have to exercise. I think like I'm very active, and you know, I run and I used to triathlons. I think you need to maintain that in your life, or you won't, you know, between how demanding our job is, you won't make it very far. So I think you always have to eat healthy and be aware of what you need on set. You know, watch out what you're eating. But it's a great question, because just as filmmakers on our own sets, it's like that, but times 100 when you're directing television.
Was there anything you wanted to add? Sorry.
Yeah, Soraya, it's a question about self-care. How do you maintain self-care when you're doing such a demanding job?
Make time for it. I mean, that's, you know, easier said than done, but the one thing that I did to also just keep me grounded when I was directing, every morning I just woke up a little bit earlier and meditated, and you know, maybe did some yoga, even if it's like 10 minutes or 5 minutes. Like, it definitely helps, just, you know, you staying grounded. You know, I heard you saying food, you know, nutrition. I'm vegan, so that was something extra that I had to be you know, aware of, because I'm not going to just be able to eat carrots and asparagus on set, you know. So making sure that if you have any dietary restrictions, that, you know, you can let people know, but you can also just help yourself and bring the snacks that you need. Yeah, and it just, I don't know, smile. Like, you know, find the joy in everything, find the beauty. I took a lot of walks around New York, and I love that city, and you know, the refreshing air, and water always is very cleansing. So yeah, that's how I took care of myself.
I think I piggyback off of both of you guys. I think, yeah, I would also wake up earlier, and I need to work out every day in like a very extreme way. Like, I need to run really hard for an hour and like get outside of my body. So, but I guess what I would say is, like, these are obviously all the basics, right? Like, eat well, take care of yourself, exercise. But I also would say it's like, understand like just how you ideally, hopefully, are listening to actors and are listening to story. Like, listen to yourself in terms of like, what is it that I need today? Like, do I need to go to sleep earlier and then wake up early to finish my shot list? Like, try to figure out what your balance is. And I guess don't be too hard on yourself if you can't quite figure it out, because it's a lifetime's work to understand both yourself and then yourself in your own work, right?
I love that.
It's,
Yeah, every
it's
director
funny
that
that,
I've sorry, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I just was thinking like the two words that that illuminate as most important, you know, and I don't think TV directing is for everyone, Michael. I think it's important that people know that, because no, it's so demanding. You sometimes will have 4 hours of sleep or less. So if you can't survive that, I always tell people, you can't force yourself into a box if, you know, you're whatever shape you are. But graciousness, like a gratitude, but endurance. And I think I think endurance is, we can't ignore it, that's required of the job.
I love that. I don't want to say any more. I think that's a good way to end this conversation. Yes. So let's end it there. I just want to say thank you to SJ, Cantu, Sarai, for sharing your wisdom and your experience with me and the audience. Thank you to Nali for providing this platform. I think for everyone in the audience who's interested in learning more about NBCU Launch, the TV Directors Program Female Forward, you can visit us on our website, www.NBCUniversallaunch.com. Also follow us on our Instagram at NBCU Launch. That's where we'll have all the updates for upcoming programs, submission windows. I will be honest, because of the strike, the next submission window for the Directors Program probably will be, well, it won't be until sort of fall next year, just because we have a class that's currently going through workshops right now. And so to get them episodes, we need to see that through. But in the meantime, you can always reach out to myself and our team. We're a resource to filmmakers, regardless if they're in our programs or not. So just utilize the resources you have and the people that you meet through great festivals like the New York Latino Film Festival. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'd say diverse voices, the people of color, the Latinos, please apply because your voice is special, so don't give up.